am doing what I am doing across this country. But why I am here in California? Because I am not going to give up on California. And neither are you. We have 50 states in this country, and California is a prime state, and we need to keep California. We need to keep it, we need to make it red, right? We need to make it red. And we need to keep telling that story. I mean, how many watched this week or paid real close attention to this Maricopa County audit, this hearing? I mean, it's unbelievable. It is unreal what we are seeing, what the media is doing or not doing and denying. I mean, it's clear. There is no doubt. It's like Kennedy, who stood up here and said this is no longer a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy. And that was a fraudulent election in Maricopa County. And it was a fraudulent election in this country. And I'm tired of what's happening. And we're going to take this country back. And everybody that's been up here today has been talking about Marxism and socialism and communism. And I'll tell you what, it's just like, and I'm going to use a little bit of what Kennedy talked about because I was up in Northern California last night, up in Yuba and Sutter County at a beautiful church up there, Glad Tidings Church, talking to a bunch of people. And we had a great time. We had a great night. We also talked to about 350 veterans. So for all the veterans in here and in the tent, thank you very much. Thanks. So, what Kennedy talked about, and he mentioned Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, okay? General Eisenhower, in his farewell speech to this country in 1961, this is 2021, 1961. So he warned about the military-industrial complex, right? That's what he warned the country about. I mean, and that would be a guy at that time that would clearly understand it. And he always said that, you know, like a lot of other leaders in time, particularly our founders also said, they always warned us about it's not going to be from a foreign threat, especially after we kicked the British's rear end in the 1770s, right? I mean, sorry, I love my British friends, but that was a war then, Revolutionary War, that got us to where we are today as a nation. Founded the Constitution, and the founders were people that sacrificed everything. But in 1961, he warned us about something called the military-industrial complex. Today, it's now the military-industrial security complex. And the security state, I mean, it gets down to this business about they're going to come knocking on your door to do what? What are they going to do? I mean, they're going to tell you how to deal with your own personal health? No. Exactly. Thank you. No. They're not. They're not going to do that. And they should not do that. They don't have the right to do that. They also don't have the right to decide how our children are going to be taught. Right? They do not have the right to teach our children this nonsense critical race theory. The next thing that's going to happen is all this 1619 nonsense. And like I always tell everybody, Black Lives Matter is not about color. It's not about color. I don't care if somebody's purple with pink polka dots. I don't care. I look at what they say, and then I look at what they do and how they act. That's what it's about. And in America, thank God that our founders, they did not create the federal government first, and then the state government, and then gave us these little things called individual liberties or the Bill of Rights. Thank God the founders had the vision and the creativity and the innovation for this new world, for these 13 colonies. They started at the bottom level. They started with we the people. And they said to we the people, we're going to give you individual liberties first. We're going to make sure that everything we've learned over the history of time, we're going to create something beautiful. And they studied everything. They studied everything. You read their diaries. You read their arguments. You look at their debates. You read all the various historical books about them. They started with us. They decided we, the people, are going to be the ones that are going to be given rights. And those rights, the Bill of Rights, are the principles that we live by. The Constitution is the fulfillment of those principles. And that's what we live by right now. What is happening is we now live in a really state of tyranny at the federal level. What they did was they gave us individual rights and they sprinkled some rights and some privileges and some responsibilities at the state level. And that's what you're seeing play out in Arizona. That's what you're going to see play out in Georgia. You're going to see it play out in Michigan. I mean, I'm paying very close attention to this stuff right now. It's very, very important. Very important that what we do, all of us, and I'm going to talk a little bit about your need to do a little bit of research about and to understand where things come from. Because everybody uses that phrase, the shining city on the hill. Where does that come from? Where does it come from? And I'm going to describe that to you because it's really, really important that we understand that because that's who we are. America's foundation is not a foundation that was built on sand. It was a foundation that was built on faith. And then the founders gave the federal government really not much to do. Some foreign diplomacy stuff, maintain a navy to protect our waters, and do some stuff with the borders, right? Like protect our borders, right? Don't leave as my buddy Bishop Leon says, don't leave that door open. Close that door, right? I mean, I love him. They only gave the federal government a couple of things to do because they knew if they started with the federal government, we'd have a king. We'd have a king, and we wouldn't have what we have, and none of us would be here doing this today. In fact, the only reason that we're able to do the kinds of things that these health and freedom festivals are doing around the country is because we still have rights as individuals. America has really, to me, this is just speaking for myself, America has two real values that we actually strive for, or we look for in ourselves, and we look for in each other, and certainly in those officials that we put into charge of things. And those two values are courage, and the other is accountability. We want courage. You know, and courage sometimes comes in unnatural ways because if you think too much, okay, like on the battlefield, if you think too much, you're probably not going to do it because fear sets in. And all of us have a sense of fear. There's a lot of fear in this country right now because we don't trust our government. And that's not a good thing for a constitutional republic, for the United States of America, to have no faith in the institutions of government. But we allow fear to set in. Right? But what we have to have and what we have to feel is we have to feel what's in our heart. Right? Women would call that women's intuition. I call it a gut feel. The hair in the back of your head, back of your neck comes up. You feel it. You know it's the harder right sometimes to do. When I would talk with young children or I would counsel young officers or young privates in the military, I would say, what is your heart telling you? What do you know is right to do? And they would say, well, this is the right thing to do. And I'd say, it's hard to do, isn't it? That takes a little bit of sacrifice. It takes a little bit of risk. It takes courage. We want our leaders to show courage. I want you to show courage because one of the things I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm asking this country to do, every single people in this room and the people across the landscape of America, you have got to stand up and start showing some courage. So that's counseling statement number one for all you in the military. The second thing, yeah, exactly. Thank you. I'll say that a couple of times. The second thing is accountability. Accountability. Accountability is something that we expect because we actually have two types of laws in the United States of America. We have something called moral laws and we have man's laws. And we teach our children moral laws. In fact, moral laws and man's laws are weaved throughout our entire system of government and throughout our entire rule of law. Moral laws and man's laws. Moral laws is what we teach our children from the day they're born. We teach our children, don't touch that. Leave Michael's stuff alone. Go do this. Just the basic things that are right and wrong. They're commonsensical type stuff. Those are moral laws. It's the law of man, or the law of God, the law of our faith that says this is right, this is wrong. It's common sense. It's common sense. Moral laws. We teach our children moral laws. And you can go through, all of you that have had children, and I know many of you have, and people out in the tent as well. Everybody's had children at some point in time, and you're teaching them different things along that path. Because if you teach them right and wrong, what you're preparing them for in their early adult stages of life, you're preparing them for man's laws. Man's laws. Man's laws are not supposed to be created by them. Man's laws are supposed to be created by us through a representative government. This is really super important because we have lost our representative government. I mean, you all know this out here in California. My God, every time you have a vote out here, you got some other thing that you're voting on, and it's like, I swear, I've tried to read a couple of them, and they're just filled with nonsense, and people typically go, but, okay? So we can say, yeah, but my counsel, and it's to me too, because it's the old, like, I'm pointing at you, but I got one finger pointing back at me. We're to blame for this. I'm tired. In fact, I want you to stop complaining about Washington, D.C. I want you to stop complaining about Sacramento. I want you to stop complaining about the counties that you're from. Unless you can complain if you're there fighting that good fight every single day. If you're not part of that fight, then you need to start thinking about where can you garner the courage to get off the couch, and I know that it's tough sometimes because, especially for women who are many in our country today, across the country and definitely in this state, we have a lot of single moms out there with children, holding down a job or two. Very, very important. And I know that. And for the people that are like my age, and I call this sort of a mature age, and those that are a little bit more mature than me, they don't have children anymore. Their children are not at home. Okay? Because I look at different cuts of our society. Because the young people that are in this country, honestly, it's like they're growing up in a place that I don't recognize. And I know some of the things that have been talked about today, particularly in our government. That's why that's why we have to fight like Flynn, because they fear Flynn. When somebody says, well, he knows where the bodies are buried. I love that. Right. Yeah. When they say that, the thing that's out there, he knows where the bodies are buried. I know how our government functions. I know a lot about the deep state, the bloated bureaucracy, the various functioning agencies, activities, and departments of our government. That's why, frankly, what happened to me, and what happened to me is an extension of what is happening to our country today. I mean, I don't worry about the sort of the Democrats anymore. That's the last time I'll use the word Democrat, because they're not. Okay? I don't worry about them. I know what their game plan is. I know exactly what their game plan is. And it's all Trump did was got in the way. Trump got in the way, and thank God he did, because what it has done, if it's done nothing else, it's woken this country up. We're in a time of warfare, okay? So I'm a military guy, and I'll use the the analogy or the metaphor or whatever of warfare, because we are in a time of warfare. And there's components of it. I mean, these are real. These are real components. One of them is physical. We're in this physical warfare. And part of it is this nonsense going on with this COVID thing. I mean, if you have such a high rate of recovery and there's preventative measures like ivermectin or hydrochloroquine, I mean, I've been around thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the last, year, and certainly in the last 6 to 8 months. But I remember in the military, I used to take hydrochloroquine like it was bare aspirin, right? I mean, I did, just because you're deployed over to these places that you have to take something to protect yourself from all the stuff you're going to eat or the different things you're going to drink. So maybe that's why my immunity's like that. I don't know. I'm one of 9 children. My mother used to take us, and if there was a family down the street that was sick, she would walk us all down there, right? We walk down, and my mother would say, Arlene, can the Flynns all come inside because we know your kids are sick. And so we go in there and we play, mess around, and we'd all come out there runny noses and, I mean, that was the way it was. That was the way it was. And that's called herding, right? That's immunity. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but that, you know what that was? That was my mother teaching us moral authority and moral laws and giving us good, God-given common sense. Because she taught us that it's a parent's responsibility to teach their children and not the government. Physical. That's a physical. That's a component of the war that we are facing. The second part is emotional. Emotional. This is a very emotional time for this country. It's a very emotional time for this country. Extremely emotional. So let's talk about the families, right? Just families, internal, right? I mean, people in here, friends, arguments that you've had, right? Friends that you've lost. I've lost a lot of friends. A lot of friends. And I found friendship in the American people, and I'll finish with that because you guys were great. You're great. So the emotional time, this emotional roller coaster that our country's going through, and the thing, and the emotional part, and I'll use this Arizona audit and the hearing that they just had. I mean, very emotional. There's a lot of emotions right now because they got caught. Right? They got caught. So they're very emotional right now, right? Because they're afraid, right? Fear. They're afraid because if they followed their heart, they would not have done the wrong thing. They would not have taken the easier path. What they did was they did the wrong thing. Emotional. So there's this emotional roller coaster going on in this country, and people fear their government. As I said earlier, we don't trust the institutions that we used to trust. One of the things that I know we were overseas fighting for was the rule of law for this country, as much as for some of these other countries when we were engaged in combat or engaged in some type of operation overseas. Rule of law. It's an emotional thing for me. Emotions are running high in this country with our families, particularly with our families, with our communities. Bishop Leon was up here and he talked about the churches, right? We got a church that's closed and a liquor store that's open. In my town, my community, it's right across the street. The liquor store is open and the church is closed. And I look at that and I say, I mean, how many of us, or you go into a restaurant, very emotional. I'm emotional about this, right? I'm determined though. So I'm very emotional about this because, I go into a restaurant with my wife and we got to have the mask on, right? And I walk over and they take us to the table. And then I sit down, right? I sit down, and I can take my mask off. And I'm like, so what happened to COVID between here and here? Right? I mean, how stupid is that? How stupid is that? I'm emotional about that. I'm emotional about that because it's stupid. My father's a retired My father's a retired master sergeant from the Army. He was a World War II Korea vet. He's deceased now. And he used to tell us, he was a great guy, one of 9 children, like I said, Irish Catholic family. My father used to tell me, Michael, don't be stupid. Right? And then he would say, go play in the street. Right? So, very emotional. And this nation has an emotional roller coaster because we don't know what's going to happen. We hear this, we hear that, and it just tears at our emotions. Okay? Intellectual. There's an intellectual war going on in this country. And part of that intellectual war, and you had some great people, and that's why I love these kinds of events, because we're learning things from these, right? You can't stand here or sit here or be out there in that tent and not learn something, even if it's just one thing that you came to learn. My mother was a great woman, and she taught us to be lifelong learners. Never stop learning. And we have a lot of fake news, right? Fake news. There's a lot of, it's unbelievable. They're following me around out here in the parking lot, the reporter comes up, and right away, because I engage. I don't mind engaging. Because I have nothing to hide. When President Trump and I, whenever we talk with each other, he always says, man, you're the most vetted man in America. And I say, no, Donald, you're the most vetted man in America. They didn't even find a parking ticket on me. Not even a parking ticket. Imagine that. But, you understand what's happening, and I have strong faith. Intellectual warfare. So, I'll tell you a very quick story, and this is something that I did to learn about something that I really, truly believe in. So, intellectually, I wanted to study something that was very personal to me. So, what I'm telling you, as you listen to this, hopefully, quick story, that when somebody says something, right, like my old man used to say, believe half of what you hear and half of what you see, and go find out the truth. Because we have to discover, and the truth is, the truth will always come out. It will always rise to the top. The truth will always come out. So, well, we all hear this phrase, shining city on the hill, and I like to talk about that because and I use it in speeches sometimes when I do formal stuff, and I talk about Ronald Reagan because I'm a big fan of him, because I think he was a transformational leader. He was a great president, but he was a transformational leader, and he's right from here, right in California. So he used to talk about shining city on the hill. And so I said, well, where does that phrase come from? Because somebody said, well, I think George Washington mentioned it. And I couldn't find it. So I kept looking and looking. And the first time that it was mentioned for this country, was a gentleman by the pastor by the name of Winthrop. And it was in 1630 on a crossing of the Atlantic on one of those old vessels as people were leaving their country. They were basically getting the heck out of Dodge because they were being persecuted for their beliefs. And they're in the middle of the Atlantic, and he gives a sermon in 1630. And Winthrop became the first mayor of Boston. And it was still, we didn't have a country at the time. It was just the new land that's out there. We're just going to go and find it, right? People had been discovering parts of it. So in that sermon, he talks about the city on the hill. And he describes, it's a beautiful sermon. You can look it up. It's a beautiful, beautiful sermon. And he talks about the city on the hill. And then he says, people that sit in the front row are probably VIPs or something, and people way in the back, in the back of the tent, and thank you again. It's like, he says, on this ship, and he's looking at probably a group of people that are no more than right here in these first couple of rows. That's about how many people were on board that ship. And he says to them, there's people here who have next to nothing, but we need you because you have a talent, you have a skill. Right? Maybe you're a carpenter, but you have a skill. And then there's people on that ship that had a pocket of gold, right? They had, or maybe they were an educated lawyer. But they all got on board that ship for the same purpose. They wanted to discover and find liberty and freedom. So I kept digging deeper because I'm saying, man, this is really unbelievable. It was so powerful. It moved me. I'm talking about it right now. It moved me so much. So then I said, where is it? Because I'm not one of these I'm not a preacher type of guy. But I have become so faithful because I do believe that there's a reason and a purpose. And I do believe personally that our destiny is decided before we're born. I believe that. It's just what I believe. So I looked, and I, putting that phrase, and that phrase, city on a hill, is Matthew 5:14, right out of the Bible. So America is the land, and our foundation is the land that God ordained. Okay, and as George Washington used to say all the time, he used to talk about divine providence. There's so many stories about George Washington and the miracles that he was able to perform both on the battlefield and in life. And he used to always talk about divine providence. All of our great leaders in time over the history of our country talked about that and talk about how this nation is the type of nation that it is. And that's, for me, that was an intellectual journey because I wanted to discover who we really were and why were we defined like that, and I found it in the Bible. And I've done a lot of studying of our Constitution and the development of our Constitution and all of those people that have written and studied and debated way back when. We're a nation built on Judeo-Christian principles and values, and we should be fearless about those values. So the last part of it, because I said 4, right? Physical, emotional, intellectual. The last part of it surrounds all 3, and that's spiritual. Because what we have taken for granted, all of us in this room, especially those in that mature category, okay? Especially those. There you go. Be proud. Be proud. We have taken for granted our faith. God has been ripped out of our society. I started looking back a little bit when we used to have public schools teaching religion in our public school system. I mean, and I could go on and on and on about the spiritual warfare that we are engaged in, but I can tell you that the side that we're up against, which I said, I'm not going to say that word, and I know what their battle plan is. I know exactly what it is. I don't even worry about it. What I worry about is us getting our act together. Okay, we the people. And I ain't talking about the Republican National Party or the GOP party here in California. I'm talking about we the people right here in this room and out in that tent. So, they'll get all crazy in the media about me talking about warfare and all this sort of stuff. And I'll give them the Italian salute, even though I'm Irish. So to all you Italians, that's I recognize your Italian chip. Okay? This is real. This is reality. Reality is what is staring us in the face. The fact of life is that nation states rise and fall. I always say, have you ever met anybody from Byzantine? Right? And not Ovaltine, Byzantine, right? Because the answer is no. You never met anybody from Byzantine. It's one of the earliest empires that ever existed. Doesn't exist anymore. I'd go through the history of the planet, the history of time, and all the various empires are gone. So how much longer? Is America waxing or are we waning? Where are we in the era and the history of this country? Well, I'm telling you, you know where I believe? And I listened last night to a woman, and then another woman on the stage was dancing to God Bless America. So the woman was standing on a stage about like this, and she was just this beautiful voice, like an angel. And she's singing God Bless America. And and there was this other ballet dancer on the stage, and she's just flittering all over the stage. And I'm standing there, and I was standing in the front, and I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, I just was flush. I was flush because I felt that, I felt something where, how you feel sometimes you're out there and just kind of, it's like, whoa. I felt such a feeling of power, right? I felt such a feeling of power. And the feeling of power was overwhelming because it was like, it's like something's coming to you and it's saying, we're going to be okay. Okay, so America, California, we're going to be okay. There you go. There you go, right there. We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay because we have a lot of Flynns out there. I got 9 in my family. We got a lot of Flynns, right? And we want to fight like a Flynn. We want to fight like a Flynn. We got a lot of Flynns out there. And that's right. There you go. There you go. There you go. I love it. I love it. I love it. Great. So I know Clay's got them shoes on. He gets them shoes on. He gets up on the stage. He just wants to get you off the stage. So I will finish with this because I need to tell you this because it's really important, and it's important for me personally and for my family. We experienced extraordinary political persecution, and it's still kind of carried on. It carries on. The people always come up to me and say, "I'm so sorry for what happened to you guys," and I tell everybody, "Don't feel sorry for me. Feel sorry for our country." Okay? And then stand up and do something, right? Stand up and go do something. Get involved. I like the phrase, local action has a national impact. Local action has a national impact. Get involved in your damn communities. Don't just go away from here and go, yeah, it was a great conference. That was fun. We had a great time. You go back and you start thinking about how you're going to get involved. I want every one of you to think of yourself as a champion, as a warrior, and as a fighter for this country. That's what I want. And you have to decide how you can best be a champion, how you can best be a warrior. Prayer is the most powerful weapon known to man. Most powerful. By far. Prayer. But after you're done praying, you got to stand up and you got to do. You got to act. Okay? Because they fear when we're down on our knees praying because they know eventually we're going to stand up and we're going to do something. So, to the American people, to all of you in this room, and to everybody that listens to this, I will tell you, on behalf of my entire family, we want to say thank you because the American people helped my family, and I particularly, breathe. And breathe. That's right. Thank you. Can you hear my heartbeat? You can feel my heartbeat. So I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, from my entire family. Thank you so much, and God bless you all, and God bless America. Thank you.